Happy birthday to our Lord and Savior, Godzilla. Couple things right off the bat. If your only point of reference for Godzilla is that giant iguana movie from 1998 or the Blue Oyster Cult song of the same name, you are in the right place. Cause you about to learn today. You gonna learn today. All right? My friend Gojitron is just waiting to teach y'all guys something. So we're going to do that without further ado. This is the man you know and love from Instagram and chats everywhere. My man, yo man, Gojitron. Welcome to the stream, sir.
Happy Godzilla Day. Salute.
Hey, your glass matches my shirt. I didn't notice that before because I'm dumb. I'm bad. I'm horrible. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Can't complain. Well, not much anyway. So Godzilla. I think the best place to start this, honestly, is just, everyone has a story about how they got into the character. So let's start with yours. How'd you get into Godzilla? Where did this come from for you?
The first monster movie I saw was Creature from the Black Lagoon, which I actually saw in school in like fourth grade in the mid 70s. They would gather us all in the auditorium every once in a while and show us a movie to keep us occupied during teacher conferences and things like that. So I saw Creature from the Black Lagoon. I was fascinated with it. And I was aware from watching after school cartoons that there was a program called Creature Double Feature. It aired every Saturday afternoon on a UHF station locally. So I never gave it a second thought, but after seeing Creature from the Black Lagoon, I said, this might be something I want to check out. So I started watching Creature Double Feature. I think the first Kaiju movie I saw was Frankenstein Conquers the World. So Baragon. Yeah, from that, Baragon is one of my favorites, just because of that. And eventually I started watching the Godzilla movies. I'm not sure which one I saw first. It might have been Destroy All Monsters or Godzilla vs. Gigan, one of the Showa ones. But yeah, I started watching that, and I was just fascinated with Godzilla from there on in.
My story is somewhat similar. We had a creature feature show. I used to live in North Ridgeville, Ohio, which is outside of Cleveland. And I think I mentioned this on one of my last short streams after a premiere or something. And we had a creature feature, and what was great about it was such a great way to get kids into creatures because the commercials would show slow motion of Frankenstein's monster and Dracula and Wolfman, Gojira, the whole bit, but it would be set to "You Are So Beautiful to Me," and I was like, oh, totally different light, and it kind of made it fun. And I would always watch that show, and I know there's a bunch of Showa era stuff on there. I don't know, again, like you, I don't know which one I saw first, but the moment I saw that green guy, I was hooked. Would occasionally watch the Hanna-Barbera show. Never was a huge fan. Godzuki can God suck it. He's a horrible character. Didn't like the formula.
I agree.
Even as a little tiny guy, I was like, this is soft. This is lame. Give me some real atomic breath stuff. And in general, I've always felt the Hanna-Barbera is a bit weak sauce. But there's a whole other story behind that. I'll have to talk about Tom and Jerry some other time. Just saying, when you go from Fred Quimby to Hanna-Barbera, that's a problem, folks. So, but the first Godzilla film that I remember seeing repeatedly was Godzilla versus Megalon. It was the first one I had access to on the regular on videotape. And what's funny to me is that I have a lot of affinity for that film, even though it is objectively probably one of the worst by far. But Jaguar, I mean, how can you not like an Ultraman ripoff like Jaguar? How can you not like this spontaneously growing robot that just the set? There's this whole piece in there, and the piece I'm about to talk about is where they're talking to each other with hand signals that no one else knows. There's no subtitles. You don't know what they're saying. Just Godzilla puts up a peace sign, And that means hold Gigan while I slide on my tail and surf towards him and kick him in the nads.
Right. That's obviously what that means.
Clearly, because he's just like, and I'm just like, as a kid, I thought, oh, okay. So when people do that, they're like going to get into a fight. That's what I thought as a kid, because dumb kid.
Yep.
But the Showa era stuff certainly has the, shall we say, most notable reputation amongst most people in our age range that grew up knowing what the character was. Then when you get into the next generation, no one really knew about the the 90s stuff. I just call it 90s and 2000 because the different era names, I'm like, nah, I'm not going there. But the 90s stuff, like we had Biolante here in the States on VHS and everything else was an import, and you really had to like Godzilla is one of those fandoms, like many Japanese imports, if you will. You have to like really seek that stuff out until maybe 2000. What was that like for you, being someone who grew up mainly in the 70s and early 80s, getting into that period of time where the flow of media just kind of stopped? What was that like for you?
I was into the fandom then. I read things like G-Fan and magazines like that. And I would seek out bootleg versions of all the 90s stuff before it was officially released in the US. And at that time, most of it was ripped from Laserdisc, Japanese Laserdisc, onto VHS with no subtitles. So I would watch the 90s era stuff just in straight Japanese, no subtitles. Don't know what the hell they were saying, but it was fine. You can kind of get the gist of kaiju films. So yeah, that was the 90s for me, just bootleg stuff until late 90s when the TriStar film that we shall not speak its name started coming out, and then all the 90s era stuff started coming out officially, and that was pretty good to be able to get that now with subtitles.
I don't understand why you would spend that many millions of dollars to set up a 10 to 30-second cameo in Godzilla Final Wars. It beggars logic. I don't understand why you would do that. So for those that don't know, the 1998 film that bore the title of Godzilla but had nothing to do with the character in terms of design, behavior, tone. It's a giant iguana film that they slapped the name on because they knew it would draw people in. The only reason it was positive for Godzilla fans at all is it was a resurgence of video releases of the older stuff. It also was the catalyst to bring the 90s stuff onto our shores, and we got some merchandise out of it in terms of shirts and things like that. But anyone who's really into the character will tell you that's an abomination of a film. Even though there's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I actually didn't mind the creature design in that film. I thought it was okay. Just everything else was terrible. The script was terrible. The casting, the acting, the quality of the acting, it was just junk. So I didn't mind the creature as much as other people did, but the overall product was bad.
Yeah, like the way they used that design made zero sense. If you have a creature moving that fast throughout a city that tight, there would way more destruction. He's not going to jump on top of a building and the building will survive. Like as soon as he goes, the whole building falls over, dude. Like there's no way. Plus, you can't use conventional weaponry to take out Godzilla. Therefore it's not Godzilla. That's it.
Right.
Like that's the bottom line. There were some clever things in the script. I think some of the casting was interesting, but they did nothing with what they had, and it's a complete piece of crap. Now, if you rewind about 13, 14 years, you have Godzilla Reborn, known in the U.S. as Godzilla 1985. That's my favorite Godzilla film, period. By far. Way over the top, because you get the same tone as the original Gojira, a little bit of what made the 56 reissue in America of Godzilla compelling. There's some aspects of that was great, but it really, again, for those that don't know, and I hate to talk to you like you don't know, I know you know, but this is for them. The original Gojira in 1954 was less than 10 years after the end of the Second World War.
Right.
Atomic power was still very new. Japan was still recovering from everything that had happened, all the fallout, literal and figurative, from the nuclear attack on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this was a very serious film meant to talk about the serious implications of atomic power and what it can do. The Americanized version took all of the American white guilt out of it and put in Raymond Burr, who would then narrate the scenes for no apparent reason. I'm sorry, Mr. Burr, I can't see what's happening with my eyes. Can you please explain it to me? Because I'm that dumb. It literally dumbed down the film for American audiences, and it's a shame. So if the only thing you've ever seen is the American one, get your hands on the Criterion Collection version, watch the Japanese one with subtitles, then watch the American one, and you'll get a really well-rounded idea of what was going on in the 50s, as well as two great monster films with a lot of the same footage.
Right.
Godzilla Reborn, aka 1985, took the tone of the original and just made it bigger. Just made it huge. Ignored everything that came after. And took all the cheese, all the kids stuff, and said, we're done. We're coming back to the original. And it was just great. But, that's when you meant something again, right?
Right.
And we didn't see the likes of that again in terms of a surprise with that musical cue until King of Monsters, I think. The 90s stuff used it sparingly. The 2000 era used it sparingly, but he wasn't ever quite as menacing as he had been. I would say that, for me anyway, the three tent poles are, four. We'll say four. So we got 54. We've got 84 with, Gojira and Godzilla Reborn. Then I would say the Shin Gojira. I think it was very cool, very different, but it brought back that menace. And then the Americanized King of the Monsters had that vibe to it as well, right? We were both old enough to see Godzilla Reborn 85 in theaters when it had a very limited American run. Did you happen to catch it?
No, I didn't. I saw it on VHS for the first time.
Yeah, I was supposed to see it. We had a special showing. It was going to be in a big coliseum, a couple, 5,000 seater or something. We had a hurricane that night, so I didn't get to go. Presumably, they didn't show it either, but we didn't get to go. It was a real shame. But I remember the following year, Top Gun was in theaters. I went to see that for my birthday. Come home, high as a kite on, take me on your mighty wings. Come home, turn on the TV, and Godzilla Reborn's just on the TV. And it was like best birthday ever. Best birthday ever. So throughout the various time periods, and I'm purposefully giving us a stopgap of 2000. I think that's when a big change and a big shift with the internet changed the way Godzilla fans interact. So we're going to talk about this and then move into that. So as we are growing up, certainly you've got the Hanna-Barbera stuff, you've got creature features, you've got the movies just kind of out there. When did you first start to notice it kind of seeping into the culture? Because I think in the 70s and early 80s, the monster movie tropes in general were always kind of a thing you put in certain kinds of commercials. They were always kind of there. But I think over that course of time, mid to late 80s moving forward, Godzilla got more and more. When did you first start to notice that he was just kind of showing up and stuff?
Well, I think it was the late 70s where we had this first big surge of Godzilla in America, between all the creature features being shown around the country. Then there was the Marvel comic in 77, which was the first American adaptation of Godzilla. Marvel was first out of the gate with that. And then 78, you had the Hanna-Barbera series, and then the Shogun Warriors Godzilla, and a bunch of other Godzilla merchandise coming out between 78 and 79. So that's when he really became my guy during that period from 77 to 79, when there was so much Godzilla stuff. And then it kind of petered off in the 80s, of course, because we had so many other properties coming up, and then late 70s with Star Wars, and then into the 80s with Transformers, Masters of the Universe, and all that. Godzilla just got kind of put on the back burner until, again, the 90s, when Dark Horse Comics and then Trendmasters came out with all their product. So Godzilla was kind of absent in America in the 80s because there was so much other stuff to choose from. So we kind of took that time off. So late 70s and then early 90s, I guess, was when I saw the two big surges of Godzilla.
So you mentioned the Shogun Godzilla.
Yeah.
When did you forgive the designer for making him look like a green ape?
Probably immediately. Probably immediately. I mean, he was so big. He was so cool. For a kid that loved Godzilla at that time, that was the biggest and best toy you could have. So, we weren't going to complain about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I got older, I mean, he doesn't really look like Godzilla. There's no big plates on his back and none of that stuff. But it was fine. It was fine when I was 10 years old.
Yeah, I get that too. I was a really picky kid. Like, I loved dinosaurs as well, but I was really critical of family members and friends that would get me a dinosaur toy. Like, oh look, it's like Godzilla. I'm like, no, Godzilla would be like this big by comparison, and no, it's not the same thing. Like, and I always kind of said he's got the thick thighs and a big butt and a big plate. And if he doesn't have any of those things, little did I know this would be the foreshadowing into my real identification with the character as a big boy. I didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't know I was going to get that big, but I am. And so, yes, I should probably have a big green tail. I don't, clearly, but I should. It's just one of those things. I don't want to get too far along in the conversation before we kind of pick up on some comments. I think it's a good place to do that. Let's see here. And I apologize, I'm not going all the way back, but I'll get what I can. Scott Hughes says, the first giant monster film I saw was probably Godzilla vs. Rodan. Great film. But around the same time, possibly even before, I remember seeing a film called Gargantuous. Yes. Which is basically two gigantic cavemen having a tussle in the dirt.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Great action. Exactly. And Daniel Dorian says, my wee brother loves the Godzilla franchise and Japanese monster films in general, as anyone should. Scott Hughes says, first VHS ever purchased was Godzilla vs. Megalon. Good purchase. Probably didn't cost you a whole lot. You get that in Kmart and Sears for like $2, $3, $4. It was a really budget thing. Bjorn Jorgensen says, Ferris Bueller doesn't belong in the Godzilla universe. I disagree. Had Matthew Broderick been playing Ferris Bueller in that film, it would have been infinitely better. Think about him talking to the camera and stuff like that. I'm just saying, it would have worked. It could have worked. It would have been a whole thing. And then you could have had, instead of Hank Azaria, you could have the Cameron character in there. Like, I don't want to. And then he has to do the whole. Basically, it's just Ferris Bueller, but with Godzilla in it, and it would be a great film. I'm just saying, I'd watch it. Bum 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 bum. Daniel Dorian says, Americanized version of Godzilla 54 was okay, but you need subtitles for the original. Correct, which is why the Criterion version on Blu-ray is your best buy. It's about $20. You get both versions with an amazingly good transfer, tons of special features. It cannot be beat. Even if you're only going to watch it once, it's worth the money. It's something I strongly recommend. And you really need to watch both versions to get an idea of where it fits in culture, because if you watch Gojira and then assume that's what was released in American theaters, no. It's not nearly as heavy. I almost feel like you should watch 56 before you watch 54, but I don't like to be that sadistic. It's watch the heavy one first and then watch the fun one. You'll be okay. You'll be all right. No, probably. Scott Hughes says, I know I'll probably be hated for this admission, but I prefer their films where Godzilla is the hero. Well, that's most of them, technically. So, I like to think of the best versions of him tend to be almost anti-hero, like the 90s characterizations of him and the current characterizations with Legendary and even the stuff in the 2000s. I think all of those where he's like, I don't really like you little primates, but we have a mutual foe here and I'm going to kick his ass and you'll benefit as a result, but I don't like you that much.
He's more like he's more like an animal defending his territory in those films. You know, saving
Exactly.
humans is a bonus, but he's really just defending his turf.
Right. But that said, you could hardly go wrong with a Sunday afternoon marathon of Showa era films where it's like all the kids are like and all that stuff. Like that's fun. But it's a whole different ball game.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like someone needs to make a supercut of all the Showa era films that removes all the reused footage and tries to make just one long movie. I think that could be done very easily. But
Mm-hmm.
internet, if you're listening, make that for me, and then just send me a Dropbox link. I'll love you forever. It'll be great. It's an editing job I don't want to have to do, but that's also part of why I don't talk about the Showa era stuff so much because it's well-worn territory. I enjoy it, but I don't go back to that stuff because it was so well-worn in my childhood and teenage years that like I've had my fill. I don't need that. I have what I would consider better kaiju fare available to me now that
Mm-hmm.
isn't as familiar, that's more fun for me. Do you think that do you feel a similar way? And if so, is it because of that where it's just well worn? Or is there an actual preference to the other versions of Godzilla for you?
I mean, I have great nostalgia for the Showa stuff, but a lot of it is really silly. You know, the monster wrestling and the dancing and the part in Hetero where he uses his atomic breath as a jet engine. That's kind of stupid. So yeah,
Just,
the
just gotta
modern
get
stuff is
somewhere.
the modern stuff is more rewatchable than the older stuff. But sometimes I'll go back to the older stuff just for nostalgia's sake.
Those are, I find that there's a few films that are really good if you're a couple beers in and you're like, I don't want anything heavy, but I want kaiju. So you kind of go
Hmm.
to like the middle Showa era stuff, like basically post Son of Godzilla or post Godzilla raids again, but
Yeah,
before like say Destroy All Monsters, like somewhere in there, or you just watch Final Wars 5 times in a row,
right.
because that's like Final Wars really is kind of the best of all worlds. So I guess we need to talk about the era that came after the 90s. So most people will probably remember if you were around in the year 2000, Godzilla 2000 came out. It was the
Hmm.
Millennium Godzilla. It was the beginning of a new era, but it actually started in Japan just a couple of years before 2000. But we didn't get it until the year 2000, as I recall. And there
Hmm.
was a whole series of films in there because they go each of these things go through cycles where you've got the Showa era, then you've got like the basically all that early stuff, and then they just stop. Then you have Godzilla Reborn, which kind of just sits there by itself. Then you have what we consider the '90s era stuff, which has a whole cycle of
Hmm.
very similar stories, few new monsters, nothing crazy. And then the 2000 era stuff, which is just again a lot of the same stories, told with better effects, arguably, and a few new characters and some twists and turns and stuff like that. So I would say like the Showa era, like your humanoid uh, enemies were like aliens and subterranean people, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And then the '90s was kind of like just randos, just mad scientists kind of a thing, as I recall. But
Yep.
2000s, we're getting like cyborg ninjas and space people again. It's kind of crazy.
Hmm.
Um, so when the 2000 era came out, and he was a bit, he almost kind of looks like a jaguar trying to stand up because his tail spikes are just so freaking huge. His plates are just gigantic. What did you think of that initial, uh, reimagining of the character being so close after the '98 American Godzilla? Like, what was your initial reaction, as you recall it?
Uh, I liked him. I like the design with the giant plates on his back. I actually have him right here. I mean, he's kind of cool.
Visually, it's mm-hmm.
He's got those giant plates, and yeah, like you said, he's kind of hunched over. I thought it was an interesting design, and of course, we're used to Godzilla changing appearance almost every film.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody has their favorites. He's had like I don't know how many different appearances, like 24, 25 different looks. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was a pretty good one. I think I like the
What's
Millennium one, and then the Final Wars one out of that era the most.
I would agree with you on that one. And I think what's interesting about having so many different appearances, I think that there's a misconception that every single appearance is actually a different costume, and that's not the case. A lot of it, especially in the Showa era, it was the suit's falling apart. We had to fix this one piece, therefore the whole look has changed. Or you had a different person in the suit. Sometimes we skip a movie, like this suit was here, then it's nuts to really look at that kind
Mm-hmm.
of a thing. And there are some fans that absolutely obsess over that trash. I don't.
Yeah.
I enjoy the lore behind it, and I enjoy that they try to like make in lore explanations for everything. Like I went down an
Yep.
internet rabbit hole. I went down this internet rabbit hole in 2012 because I was doing a review of Gojira and Godzilla side by side for the internet. And I was like, all right, I got to go in depth on this stuff. I, for like 3 hours, was reading fan theories about why the oxygen destroyer doesn't just turn water into hydrogen gas. Why
Right.
there's still liquid in the thing. And there's this whole like long, protracted freaking explanation of like, well, it places it with this kind of biological fluid that will replenish the oxygen within 24 hours and not kill it. Have you ever read any of that stuff? It's kind of crazy.
No. No, I have not.
It's out there because it's like, okay, I get it. And then and then when you get to one of the newer films, I would guess Millennium Era, if I'm correct. Like the next time they really tried to use an oxygen destroyer, like there's like one line of dialogue, like, oh yeah, it replaces it, and that's the end of it. But like for 40 years, people were like, oh, there's this whole thing where it does this, and they try to explain everything. It's kind of like the same folks that don't think that the Star Trek tactical manuals that were published were good enough, and then go make their own.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, really? I'm not going to criticize usage of anyone's time. You do what you want to do. It's your time to use it, but I kind of feel like maybe spend less of your time on that one thing. Oxygen destroyer.
Yeah, it sounds like Transformers fans trying to explain mass shifting. It's like
yeah,
guys, the writers just didn't give a crap. That's the explanation.
mm-hmm. Same with Jaguar. Like I saw just reams of material on trying to explain away his mass shift and everything. The best one that I came up with was that I saw was that basically his supposedly his smaller humanoid sized form was so densely packed with molecules and that it would grow and expand, but as it would do so, it would duplicate, and then it would somehow release the mass off as like hydrogen or something when it left. And I'm like, okay, he's a robot that grows and shrinks. Like, what's the problem here? Like, come on. And this means I'm going to tail kick the guy. Like it's I accepted it as a kid. What's so hard? Like, why do we have to have this deep a lore? So I say this, folks at home, to say that no matter how deeply into Godzilla you are, there are people who are deeper into it, and that's okay. Just like with Star Wars, where like the guy that like wears the Padawan braid to work and like has a lightsaber like in his trunk and stuff like that, like it's okay, it's perfectly fine. Every fandom has them. We just happen to have folks that are like that. So, 2000s era, you like the Millennium version, you like Final Wars era. What I found interesting about the Millennium era stuff was that we had a Destroy All Monsters SOS, but then we also had Final Wars. Like they could have just left it with that Destroy All Monsters because you're getting the same kind of ooh, look at this. But I'm not sure why he did it, but he was like, nah, one more, bigger monster brawl. Godzilla kicks everybody's ass. Also, space ninjas again. It was kind of crazy. Do you recall the first time you saw that? Like, not necessarily the situation, but do you recall your reaction the first time you saw that?
Oh yeah, I loved it. I adore that movie because Final Wars was the 50th anniversary film. So their strategy with that was kitchen sink, throw it all in, all the monsters, the aliens, the flying submarines, the whole thing. Just put it all in there, and it was nuts.
Yep. Word association. What's the first word that comes to your mind when I say to you Super X?
That flying ship from '84.
Yeah. And then they kept iterating on this with all these stupid, I don't, like you think about, if you try to think about Godzilla post 84, logically blood will shoot out your nose. So if it happens here, don't worry, I don't have some weird sickness. I'm just thinking about Godzilla. Um, they they really went out of their way, because Japan wasn't allowed, and still isn't to this day, as far as I know, an offensive military force. Like the UN's like, no, you don't get to do that. So instead, they got really good at electronics, and they had their own, their version of the National Guard, the Japanese Defense Force. And for the movies, I feel like there was a kind of frustration that was being like a pressure valve that was getting released, because they would just get all this military might and go after these giant monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to wonder if, like, there's a lot of Japanese people that was like, yeah, look at our military might, get them. And then Godzilla kills them, and like, oh yeah, that's what happened the last time too. But it wasn't a green monster. Yeah. So I always try to look at it from my perspective as well as theirs, because it's going to play differently depending upon who the audience is. And I think that's never changed. Is that an exercise that you find yourself going through when you watch them sometimes?
Not really. In regards to how the Japanese military reacts to the monsters, is that what you're talking about?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, not really. I think secretly the Japanese people want Godzilla to win. They have great affection for him.
Okay, fair enough.
Hmm.
Jim Largo asks, you specifically, was Godzilla naturally atomic powered, or was it because of testing weapons in the ocean? This is a, and pardon the phrase, Jim, this is a basic bitch question. It's okay. I know you haven't started your marathon yet, so take it away, sir.
So the original 1954 origin for Godzilla was he was a dinosaur that was in hibernation. There was an H-bomb test, and he was irradiated and awoke and mutated, and he was pissed off. So that's about it. And it was an American hydrogen bomb test that awoke him.
Right.
And that was based on a real life event that happened in, I think, 1952. The U.S. tested an H bomb at a place called Bikini Atoll, and the explosion was about 2.5 times greater than they anticipated. And the fallout from that explosion affected a Japanese fishing vessel called the Lucky Dragon Number 5, and the crew got radiation sickness, and one of them died. And it was a huge news story at the time. So that was a real world event that inspired the creation of Godzilla.
Best possible answer. Like, if this were like a studio talk show, I should just make you my Ed McMahon, because that's perfect. That's way better. I could have done it. Like, what do you want? Like, I would have stopped it, and he's pissed off. That's why I would have stopped. It's amazing. Thank you. Scuba Pete is here. Welcome, sir. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Jim Largo also asks, do we like the Rampage video game homage to monster movies? I'll go first. Yes. Because as a kid, we didn't have a lot of Godzilla video games. We still don't, technically. And most of them are pretty trash. So when Rampage comes along and you get to just be a lizard that is Godzilla adjacent and just beat up people and eat people and destroy buildings, and yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. What do you think?
I'm not a gamer, so I've never played it, but I did see the movie with The Rock, and I thought it was goofy and fun.
I have not seen the movie with The Rock because the game was enough for me. It's a mid-'80s thing. They did a putt-putt. It's a lot of fun. Since I'm on the subject, I'll just run the gamut real quick for those that don't know. We had an NES Godzilla here in the States that was made by Toho. Kind of interesting, a little frustrating. It tried its best. It was not horrible, but it wasn't great. there was a sequel that was horrible on the NES. We had like a Super NES one, was more like an RPG. That was not. It was not super. They called it Super Godzilla. It was not super at all, and I mean, a little bit. We've had a few since. There were some great Dreamcast ones that are Japanese imports that you should check out. And there's also like a fighting royale on the Super Famicom. In the PlayStation 2 and Xbox era, we got a lot of like Godzilla fighting games, which are really good. Seek them out on any system you can get your hands on. Destroy All Monsters Melee being the first. Then the next one that kind of comes to mind is one that was a tie-in to the 2014 Legendary Pictures film, and that game was basically Godzilla as your abusive drunk uncle walking through the house on Thanksgiving after just that one shot too many. He's like, because it's just the way the character moved and behaved. As a matter of fact, when I streamed that game on my channel, that's how I role played Godzilla. So the whole stream was just like, get out of the way! Because that was the only way I was going to have any fun, because that game was so slow and horrible. So I don't, even though I'm a huge video game fan and I've used, versions of Godzilla in the intro and as my branding for such a long time, it's been a disconnect because he has not been well represented in that realm. And I would say that until relatively recently, the same has been true with toys. We talked briefly about the Shogun Warriors Godzilla, which was, again, at the time, the best we were going to get for a long time. There were lots of like third-party knockoffs that were arguably better, but still not great. Mm-hmm. What was after the Shogun Godzilla? What was the first reference or memory, I should say, you had of a Godzilla toy that kind of hit the mark for you?
Well, it had to be the Trendmasters line in the mid '90s. I was an adult collector then, and that hit all the sweet spots. It had all the '90s era monsters, and then it started getting into the Showa era monsters before it was canceled. But I really liked that line. They had all the different scales: the 12-inch, the 4-inch, little PVC guys. The sculpts were good, and I thought that was a really good line, especially for a time when there wasn't a lot of Godzilla media coming into the U.S., except for the Dark Horse comic, because, like we said, the 90s era films hadn't been released officially yet. So I thought that was a pretty good line, and it did really well for Trendmasters, I think.
Yeah, and it was something where you could see it just about anywhere. Like, I'd see them in Spencer's from time to time. Certainly, they were at your Toys R Us and so forth, and they were prevalent enough when they were released that I think a lot of people who collect toys now or collect anything fall into the same trap where you see something in a store and your brain just goes, well, that will always be there. I will get it eventually. At least I do that a lot. Mm-hmm. And as a collector now, if I don't hit the pre-order, like, I'm never going to get it, kind of a thing. Yeah. It's weird how that reverses. Was there anything from that line that you didn't pick up that you wish you had at the time?
Not really. I think I was all in on that line at the time. I bought all the 12-inch guys with the sound effects. I bought all the small guys, the PVC sets. I even bought those G-Force action figures, which were basically Power Rangers knockoffs that could fight Godzilla. So yeah, I was all in on the whole thing. Nice. I wasn't all in on the movie line.
Oh, right. Well, I wasn't going to count that. I remember seeing those and just going, nope. No, sir. My parents brought me home a Godzilla shirt after they were on vacation from that film, and it was in the font of the new movie, but it was like the shirt itself was very nice, and there was no picture of Godzilla on there. I was like, this will pass. It'll be fine. That film, I kind of say, look, if you're into herbal relief, a lot of that and a little bit of booze does wonders for that film, but not something I suggest anyone watch. It's just kind of like,
So let me ask you, after the '98 film was the Fox Kids animated series. Did you ever watch that?
Yes, I watched like 2 or 3 episodes, and I thought it was better than the movie, but still
Hmm.
not on point. It was leaning into it in a better way, and had they continued that throughput and taken more risks and maybe done a second film with the animated series being that through line, it might have could make sense. I will give this to Fox. That cartoon Godzilla was leaps and bounds ahead of the Hanna-Barbera stuff,
Hmm.
in terms of like quality and story. So I did enjoy it. I'm not going to sit here and say that I didn't.
Yeah.
Um, but
I
dealing with
thought that
source
series.
material,
I thought that series corrected all the things that were wrong with the film. The characterization, the writing was better. They were story arcs. The way they wrote Godzilla as a beast to defending his territory, and then of course there was a new monster every week, which is the thing I loved about the Hanna-Barbera show. Even though it was cheesy, I love seeing new monsters all the time. Same thing with the Marvel comic. All these different media introduced all these different monsters for Godzilla to fight, which was great. So I really enjoyed the Fox
I've
Kids show. I think it's really, really good.
I've never seen all of it, and I know they
Hmm.
have it out on DVD somewhere. You probably get bootlegs and stuff like that. It was on my Amazon wish list for years, and I just never got around to it. So maybe I'll make it a point to do
It's still
that.
on Amazon on DVD. You can get the entire series, 40 episodes, for $9.
Okay, I'll get it on the next pay cycle for sure. Then
Worth
I mean,
looking
there's
into.
no reason not to get it. Granted, it'll take me 5 years to get around to watching it, but at least I'll have it in the collection. Just how it goes, man. Like I bought the Critters collection on Blu-ray 3 weeks ago or something, specifically to watch over Halloween. We didn't get to it till yesterday. We watched them all together, but it was just one of those things where, yeah. Oh, a wild Acronel appears. Good to see you, sir. For those that don't know, he is the opening narrator of the Game Grind series that I have here on the channel. So, welcome to you, sir, and your silky, silky voice. Uh, ba- 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 ba. Scuba Pete says there's a Shogun Godzilla in a shop here, 1,200 in the box, and it always thinks of you when he passes by. Is that even remotely a reasonable price for that item?
I have not priced that since I sold my original years ago, so I have no idea. But I know Shogun Warriors with the box can get up there.
Hmm. And this brings us to why I, until extremely recently, thanks to you, I haven't really dug into the Godzilla stuff too much. Before the show, we were talking about this 11-inch. I'm assuming it's a Playmates release because it was like 3 or 4 years ago or something like that.
Hmm.
No, it would have been 2019, so it would have been a Playmates release. I'm almost certain of it. And it's just the Showa era sculpt, nothing crazy, but he's beautiful and they're inexpensive. I know they also did a Mecha Godzilla in that scale in that line. I never went out to get him again. Should have, didn't. And then more recently, someone gifted me a Godzilla from the Godzilla versus Kong. And aside from like a little figurine that just like a little statue from Godzilla Reborn, that's really all I've got until you sent me all those miniatures from the video we posted on Monday. And it's not because I don't want them. It's because every time I get a hair up my butt to go get them, I can't find the whole line in one place at relative prices. And
Right.
I don't know why it is that in a world where I'm collecting all these superpowers things and I'm going nuts getting Motu Origins and stuff, I don't know why I can't break that disconnect. I think it's because Godzilla figures, by and large, relative to their size, command so much more cost, generally speaking. Even the 6-inch figures are kind of crazy. Even when they first come out, for whatever reason, they seem more expensive than similarly scaled lines. Can you speak to that?
Uh, I think the Playmate stuff, when you can find it at retail, the 6-inch line is about $12 a figure. So that's not bad. The imported stuff from Bandai, I collect what's called the Movie Monsters line, which is a similar 6-inch line. So the Bandai stuff can be displayed with the Playmate stuff, and they look like they go together. Those figures imported are about 25, so about twice the price of Playmates, but you get a good variety of figures. You can find them on Amazon. You can find them on Big Bad Toy Store. I've got a few things on pre-order. So if you stick to that 6-inch scale, it's not that bad. But then all the Japanese stuff, there's a lot of different stuff coming out of Japan that's really pricey. Like and plus the stuff like the SH Figure Arts, I don't get into those. Those are very expensive.
No.
And
No.
there's the NECA lost the license, so there's no more NECA. But now Super 7 has the license, and they just announced today for Godzilla Day they're doing Godzilla reaction figures starting next year. So
Yeah,
I'll have to keep an eye on those and see what that's all about.
It's going to be about too expensive and horrible quality on Bubble. No, absolutely not. Think about this for a second. A reaction figure of Godzilla. He's going to be standing straight up. His tail's going to be like truncated to fit standing up, or he'll be on his side with a little bit of tail, and it's going to look like trash. It's like a trash because they're trying to make a 6. There's no reason to get them unless the sculpts are amazing, which invariably they won't, because they're not going to scale with anything else. There's the whole reason for the reaction line, at least in theory, should be you're getting figures that you never got, and they'll scale and be on par with Star Wars figures from Kenner, the actual vintage stuff, as opposed to the vintage collection stuff. That's the idea behind it. So when they're throwing in these figures, so if you're really doing a reaction figure of Godzilla, he should be about this, as taller than my hand can go off of this desk, because he should be in scale with 3 3/4 inch. I don't know what they're thinking over there, except we got the license to slap a figure together and put them on the shelf because some idiot will buy them. I hope you're not going to buy them, because I just called you an idiot. I didn't mean to do that. I just don't see it succeeding. They'll have to do something really special for me to even consider, because I'm not a fan of Super, aka Subpar 7 at all to begin with. They're just a few stone throws away from being a NECA, and that's not saying much. Because I look at the figure art stuff and I look at the Bandai stuff. I love the Playmate stuff, but it's one of these things where not having a destination to go to, like a Toys R Us, where they're just they're going to stock everything. It really kills my enthusiasm. Because when it's a modern line where I don't know what it is. There's something about Godzilla that I cannot look at it the same way that I would look at any other toy line. I cannot get past it. Maybe it's because I formed a Kaiju religion back in 2011. Maybe that has something to do with it. Spoilers, it does. I hold these characters in such a high regard that I find it difficult to just do the same practices I would with any other figure line and just stop whining about it. I don't know what it is. I don't get it. So we've talked about the films up through Millennium. We talked about Final Wars. What are your thoughts? Because it has resulted in a huge resurgence of Godzilla interest here in the States. Do you like the Legendary Films treatment of everything?
Overall, yeah. I mean, the first film was very slow, and I don't like the way they cut away every time there was going to be a fight and just showed you the aftermath. I think that was a mistake. I think the film would have done better if you had shown an actual monster film. King of the Monsters, the sequel, was fantastic, in my opinion. I mean, with the human drama aside, it gave you what you wanted. Godzilla, King Ghidorah, Rodan, and Mothra just kicking the crap out of each other. That's great. Godzilla vs. Kong was fine. I thought it was weird that we went from conventional weapons to Mechagodzilla in 7 years, technologically, but, it's a movie about giant monsters, so what are you going to do? Cut it some slack.
Same thing I find it with the Hollow Earth thing. My buddy Rob, he's like, I can't get over the Hollow Earth thing. I'm like, this is a movie about giant freaking animals killing each other. Is it that big of a leap that there's a Hollow Earth? Like, what's the problem here? But you were saying.
Yeah, I find it interesting that every Godzilla series starts off with sort of a message, Like the '54 movie was a commentary on atomic holocaust and things like that. The '84 movie came along in the middle of the Cold War, and you had that subplot with the Americans and the Soviets trying to pressure Japan into using nuclear weapons. Of course, Shin Godzilla was a commentary on the nuclear disaster that happened after the earthquake and tsunami back in whenever it was, 2011. And
The
then the
Amphib was
legendary,
definitely that.
yeah, the legendary series starts off with like this climate change and global warming message that the Titans are coming back because we're tampering with the earth and the environment and all that. Each series starts off with the serious message and eventually de-evolves into just giant monsters beating the crap out of each other. So we quickly lose the message in order to have the popcorn films.
I agree. 100%. It's something where these characters can easily be kind of rebranded to fit the era that they're coming out in. I think that's why there's such a longevity. Um, and as with many films that are successful at doing something that begins serious, a lot of the copycats, they miss that somewhere along the way. Like they fail to have a heart to the film.
Mhm.
Gamera being the most notorious example. Don't get me wrong, Gamera is a monster of the people. He is clumsy. He knocks over some buildings from time to time. Friend to children everywhere, clearly. His jet engines, a little suspect, you know. Um, but ultimately, a rather ineffectual character overall, unless you're a Gamera fan, which fine if you are, but we have Godzilla, like he's right there. It's kind of like why if someone said you can have a filet mignon steak cooked to perfection, or here's like a tiny sliver of beef jerky, which one are you going to take? And the person that likes Gamera is going like, I want the beef jerky's fine. It's good for me. Do you have any kind of like a distaste for kind of the knockoff kind of stuff, or do you kind of find it all fits together in some weird way?
No, I think the films complement each other. It's okay to have variety. I actually think the '90s Gamera trilogy is excellent. Those are three
Yeah.
really good films, in my opinion. And the '60s Gamera stuff is not rewatchable at all. It's all
Oh,
terrible because of it's way sillier than the Godzilla stuff. But when I was watching it as a kid in the '70s, it was fine.
right.
But yeah, I like all giant monsters. I mean, even the American stuff, the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and them, and It Came from Beneath the Sea, all that stuff I gravitate towards. I have everything on physical media, and I'll pull it out once in a while and watch it. So Godzilla's the king, but it's okay to have variety.
I agree with that. This is a question I never thought I'd ask another human being because I never thought about it until this moment. Would you consider the American big monster movies? Would you consider them kaiju films in their own way?
Yes, I
Because
mean,
kaiju means big monster. I mean
right?
that's fair.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I never thought about it because I always looked at the '50s movies just being '50s movies. Let's call them the '50s atomic monster movies,
Hmm.
and I just said they're over here. And they should all be in the Criterion Collection for crying out loud. All of them, all everything you
Yeah.
just mentioned, and then a few others too.
Hmm.
There's a lot of cool stuff out there.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
a lot of it
Pacific
is
Rim. I think Pacific Rim actually brought the word kaiju into the mainstream. So now we can
yes,
just apply it to any giant monster.
sure. And those films were a lot better than they had any business being. They weren't my favorite, but they were fun. You know,
Hmm.
um, like Robot Jocks. The themes on that movie show. But if you want a giant mech movie in a pre CG world, there's really nothing else for you but that movie. So it
Hmm.
exists. It's fine. Coming back to the toys, Acronell asked a question: thoughts on the physical quality of recent figurines sold? I would say that greatly depends upon the line and what you're trying to get. The line,
Hmm.
scale, all that stuff. Because Bandai always delivers. I've never had a bad Bandai product in my hand that I can recall. They
Hmm.
always have a lot of good attention to detail. I've never heard of something my Bandai figure fell apart. versus a NECA where they have a reputation for things breaking in the box. So that's it. The Playmate stuff, you can tell there are some corners cut for the sake of cost, but you never feel that when you're manipulating them. They're pretty solid figures, in my opinion. And as far as the Super 7 stuff, like they have varying reputations on QA, but I just don't think they're thinking things through. They're just putting out product, which is to me distasteful. Like I don't like just putting it out because they have the license and they can, which is their MO. So if you're looking for like accuracy and a reverence for the characters, go to Bandai or Playmates. I think that quality wise, you're not going to get a lot better than that unless you want to spend buku dollars. For sure. Any differing of opinion? Anything you want to add to that?
No, that's about right. I mean, the Bandai stuff is vinyl, soft vinyl. It's the joints aren't going to break. They usually only have 4 or 5 POA, but the sculpts and the painting are really good. The Playmates line started off really shaky with some really soft sculpts and kind of bad paint jobs. But the recent figures that they've just come out with, I just bought a new Playmates Rodan and a Gorosaurus, and those are both really nice figures on par with Bandai quality.
So would you say a good piece of advice for someone starting to collect that line would be make sure you're checking the copyright stamp on the box to be the more recent 2020, 2021 stuff?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I'm taking notes for myself too, see, because it's going to happen. Because I can't. Being this big of a Godzilla fan, both literally and figuratively, like how can I not have those? You did it. Just like with the Transformers, but those are great, by the way. Those core figures are awesome. Oh my goodness gracious! And thank you for that. Like, you took a big leap of faith with that. Because I've been so like, I don't collect Transformers. They don't look right. And then these show up, and I'm like, oh my god,
I got you.
I see you, brother. I see you. So thank you. And if you haven't seen the video yet, go back and watch it because he got me almost, if not the entire line of characters for the most part. On these little, those are Bandai, right? The little Bandai miniatures, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if they ever did like Destroya or any of
Yes.
Of like the outlet.
There are probably hundreds of those Gashapon style figures out there. It just depends on how available they are. Of course, the older ones that are out of production are going to cost you more on eBay to get. But yeah, Bandai has done those small Gashapon figures for every conceivable kaiju in the Godzilla series and the Gamera series.
Well, see, I just need to have you in a little corner on my screen all the time. Because
the problem with buying Godzilla toys, as much as we don't like to think so, Godzilla is still a niche property. So you have to search this stuff out. We know how hard Masters of the Universe Origins is to get, but you can still get them. But the Godzilla stuff, you really got to search out.
Yeah, and I think in a way, it kind of mimics the fandom from our generation because we had to actively seek this stuff out to consume.
Right.
The toys are no different. So I don't know that it's a bad thing because it kind of keeps the spirit of it alive. But as a person who wants these things, I just want to walk into a freaking Walgreens or a Walmart or a Target or a toy store and get them at retail price anytime I want. But I don't know if you've noticed a theme on this show, Carl. I'm a bit of an idealist, and people don't like me. So when I see something and I go, that sculpt's a little too big for the Castle Grayskull. You gotta get the Universal license pulled. Not true, but okay. I digress. Now, while we were talking, Scuba Pete came in with a very generous $5 tip. Thank you so much. And he said, Gojitron rules, which I agree with 100%. Thank you so much.
Right very, back very at cool. You, Pete.
And then some. Check out the channel Chasing 80s Toys if you haven't. It's got the best trifecta of people in one place you're going to find on YouTube for toy collecting, and it's international, and they're amazing. Chris, Jeff, Pete, boom, dream team. Love those people. If you're not there, get there after the show. Of course, don't do it right now, because unless you have a second device. If you have a second device, just go do it now. It's fine. We're okay. But
and if you do go there, you can see all this stuff close up.
Exactly. See, I'm glad I was setting you up. I was glad. I didn't want to be too. All right. Another question from chat. Well, who is the most underrated kaiju for Godzilla films? Oh man, that's a good question. So for underrated, I think the criteria probably needs to be just what what do we like about the monster that people just ignore, because there's not really a lot of characterization per se. So where does your head go for that?
I go directly to Anguirus. Anguirus is Godzilla's right-hand man. No matter how much the bigger monsters beat the hell out of him, he always comes back for more. And he's always right by Godzilla's side when he needs him. So I'd have to go with Anguirus.
He is
As for those that aren't familiar, Anguirus is the one that looks like the giant porcupine.
Yep. And he does the ball roll thing. I love that, by the way.
Yep.
He's kind of the Ram Man of the Godzilla universe in many ways. He's just right there. He's the smartest dude, but he's loyal, and he can screw some stuff up when he gets, if you give him enough running space, he's going to get you. And he's a badass. He needs his own solo film in today's era. Like they need to bring him in the next legendary film and like give him some backstory, like give him some lore, because that's a badass design, beautiful kaiju monster with some cool powers that you could have some cool fun with. Imagine a bouncing Anguirus just causing like mini earthquakes as he goes through North America trying to get to whoever is causing trouble. I would love that. I would sign on in a heartbeat. Anguirus, hands down. I'm so glad you said that. Otherwise, we might have had an argument. We're good. Bob Squad says Skull Island was arguably the greatest film ever made. Hard disagree. Fun movie. Not even but you're entitled to your opinion. I don't wish to take it away from you. I just vehemently disagree.
It was fun.
I definitely enjoyed that. Off topic, Daniel Dorian says, but did Hasbro or Bandai ever have a go at Jurassic Park figures? I don't think anyone's had a go at, aside from Kenner, Mattel, and Lego. I've never heard of anything outside of those lines. Have you?
No.
Well, there you go. Bob Squad also says that as far as they're concerned, we're legally required to always pronounce it Destroyer. That's the Americanized version, from what I understand. I believe it's the Destroyer in Japan. I might have made that up in my head. I don't know.
I believe it's Destoroya. 4 syllables.
Destoroya?
Destoroya. Close enough.
Interesting question from Bjorn Jorgensen. Would the Rancor or Sarlacc be considered kaiju? I don't think they're big enough. That's the bottom line for me. I don't think they're big enough.
Yeah. I mean, the literal translation of kaiju is strange creature. So technically they could be. I think when you say Daikaiju, that's a giant strange creature. So Daikaiju would be more literal for what we're talking about.
And there's your Japanese lesson from Gojitron. Perfect. Jason Garcia says the Bandai vinyls are easy to collect until you get the obscure characters like Titanosaurus. They go for almost $120. Yeah, screw that. No, thank you. Because who wants Titanosaurus? Unless
everyone.
Right. Unless you're a huge fan of, say, Monster Island Buddies. Have you ever watched? I assume you're a big fan of that channel.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For those that aren't in the know, for about close to, if not over 10 years now, he's been doing this kind of machinima with just figures and some very light CG effects, and does all the voiceover. And he's created his own headcanon around these characters, and it's not for children. Do not show this to your children ever, but it's fun. Like, that's what I call a brandy and a cigar kind of show to binge, because you need something that's going to creep up on you over time. Because if you go in there 6 beers in, you won't make it long, because you'll be like, what's going on? Because it moves fast. It's so funny, and he's moved on into doing like reviews and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And he's arguably the best source of just mainstream Godzilla information and opinion. There's other more
Yeah.
niche channels out there, but if you
Mhm.
want a good vibe, you want to introduce yourself to all the characters without having to watch the films, get a feel for what Godzilla can mean to somebody, like it's and also get some great original storytelling. I would argue he's probably the best source out there.
Yeah. He just did a video this week of why the Fox Kids series did not get a toy line, which is really interesting.
I haven't seen it yet. It's on the watch later, which is now getting
Yeah.
pages long at this point. The whole thing. My pleasure, Chris. My pleasure. Am I missing anything else? Tim Hayes asks, "What to not show to your children?" Monster Island Buddies. It's a YouTube channel. It's a lot of adult themes in that one. So if you haven't seen it, watch a few episodes, like say 5 or 6, then come back to my unboxing from Monday and rewatch the Gojitron box when we get to the Godzilla stuff. Because when I pull out Rodan, you'll be like, "Oh, I get that reference now." Some people didn't. They're like, "What? Godzilla?" Like they didn't get it at all. I'm so angry right now. Oh, it's great. It's good. I don't want to spoil it. It's good stuff though. So, we are just over an hour, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. So we're probably going to wrap up around 90 minutes. But I want to kind of open the floor to you, because we've covered in brief all of the different eras of Godzilla. We've talked about the toys, again, in brief over everything. We've talked about cultural influence. You kind of see it seep into things. Obviously, we've seen it in advertisements like Dr. Pepper, Snickers. You even have Godzilla references in Chappelle Show, stuff all across the board. Outside of the films themselves, did you ever find a particular reference really compelling, or just you're like, "Oh," anything like that? Whether it be a commercial, a short film, anything at all?
Not really, because most of what you see outside the actual films is parody. Because as much as we respect Godzilla, he's not a very respected property, I think, because of the way the films have dubbed over the years. That's sort of a source of ridicule. And I think people use Godzilla mostly for parody and comedy. So, yeah, there wasn't really anything that struck me. I mean, except for the comic book adaptations and things like that took the material seriously.
Sure. There is one that I think kind of both shows a begrudging but massive respect for Godzilla, but also is insanely funny. And don't spoil it for anybody. But if you haven't seen it, folks, go look up Bambi versus Godzilla.
Oh, yeah.
Probably the best short film I'll ever watch.
The shortest of short films ever made.
But amazing. Just go check it out. I won't spoil it, but it's good. And I believe it was the opening act for the showings of Godzilla Reborn, aka Godzilla 85. Because it was included on some US releases of the VHS and later on the DVD, as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It wasn't on the Blu-ray, which I was really pissed off about. Because I got the Blu-ray when it came out maybe 5-6 years ago. I'm like, where's Bambi vs. Godzilla? Like, that's part of this. That's like the thing. But I get it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to have to find the best transfer of that available on the internet, and I'm going to burn it to a Blu-ray, and I'll make a cover, and I'm going to put that on my shelf. I've just made that decision now. It needs to happen for sure. Is there anything? Because I know that there's other stuff. Like someone in chat mentioned the Godzilla anime stuff on Netflix, which I think is a very poor use of the character. I think you could have
Mhm.
put any monster in Godzilla's place and had the same kind of a series going on. I think they once again used the Godzilla name to promote an anime series they wanted to do, which it's not the worst thing in the world, but not really. It didn't do anything for me. Um, and a buddy of mine warned me. My buddy Grant warned me. I was like, I'm gonna try it anyway. He's like, you're gonna hate it. You're gonna hate it. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try. Nah, watch it. Is there anything else Godzilla that we either haven't covered or didn't go too in depth on that is a passion of yours that maybe we should talk about more?
I would say the Marvel comic. That
Okay.
thing, because in the mid-'70s, before I was into Godzilla, I was into superheroes. So Super Friends was my gateway drug. I started reading comic books. I started collecting the Migos, and then watching all the reruns of the Spider-Man animated series and the George Reeves Superman, the Adam West Batman on television. So when they came out with that Godzilla comic, and he was set in the Marvel universe, that was everything. And that 24 issue run is one of my favorite comic book runs of all time. It's absolutely stupid and silly to see some of the things that happened, but I love it, especially the finale where he's in the middle of New York City. Because the comic starts out where he shows up in Alaska, makes his way down the West Coast, hits California, then travels cross country for 2 years. And eventually, in the end of the series, he ends up in New York City. And that's when the Fantastic Four and the Avengers take notice. Not when he was rampaging across the rest of the country. Only when he gets in the middle of New York City do the Avengers say, oh shit, there's a giant monster. It's like, where have you been? Because S.H.I.E.L.D.'s been chasing the thing for 2 years, and they never bothered to call the Avengers. It was stupid. But anyway, I love that series. I especially love this one scene where Godzilla's on one side of the Empire State Building, and he's trying to push it over, and then Thor gets on the other side to hold it up. And of course, in real life, the whole thing would crumble. But it's this reverse tug of war where Thor is actually holding up the Empire State Building when Godzilla's trying to push it down. It's ridiculous. But I love the whole thing.
Yeah, but that's the kind of thing that you can do with those kinds of licenses.
Yep.
You know, and there's a lot of later comic series that I really like. And if you've been collecting some of them, this name might mean something to you. It's a young man named Jeff Zorno. Did a lot of covers for some of the more recent Godzilla stuff. Does that ring a bell to you?
I haven't kept up on the recent Godzilla stuff. You're talking about IDW?
Yeah, like 10 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with all that stuff yet.
Okay. He did some of the covers and some of the storyboard stuff for him. And he and I have been friends for 15 years or something like that. And he did some artwork for us. At the same time, he was doing Godzilla stuff. So that to me, when I was in a band, that was one of the coolest things in the world that you could have a Godzilla artist doing stuff for us. And very different stuff. The guy has a very modern take on the ECW style of art, but he used that to great effect with the Godzilla stuff that he did. But Jeff, if you happen to be watching this, because I know you just look for Godzilla stuff, love you. Draw me a Godzilla tattoo sometime because I need one. Yeah. Godzilla Reborn era, please. That's the best Godzilla. I'm sorry. Not sorry. That's just I don't know what it is, but there's just something about when he opens his mouth and rears his head back, and then just because of the way the actor was and what was going on, the tongue kind of vibrates a little bit, it just shakes because it's rubber. But there's just something about it that made it seem more real. A word on guys in suits versus the CG stuff. One of my biggest concerns going into the Legendary Film stuff was that the the CG would be subpar. But then you find out that even though they're doing the CG, you've still got actors doing the stuff. When I saw how they were doing Ghidra, I was like, that's genius.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost better than the original stuff because you're getting real actor performances on every aspect of the creature.
Right.
Do you find that that's a natural progression of the man in the suit stuff? Um, or is it a stopgap to keep people like us from rioting? Like, what's your take on
I think motion capture is going to be a big thing going forward. I mean, the Andy Serkis performances in Lord of the Rings and King Kong and Planet of the Apes kind of saw that was a really viable way of doing creatures. So I think that's going to be
that?
the way they do it going forward. And yeah, I think it
Yeah,
looks
and
great.
it really does because if you look at purely CG stuff where only the CG artists have the input for the most part,
Hmm.
there's even though there's a person controlling it, it's still an animation, which makes it less alive, for lack of a better
Hmm.
term. And when I saw, particularly King of the Monsters, because I know they did some stuff on the original Legendary Pictures film, a little bit of it,
Hmm.
but it was a mixture of different techniques. Whereas in King of All Monsters, they went full motion capture and have continued that as they move forward into King Kong versus Godzilla,
Hmm.
which I think is smart. But as soon as I knew they were doing that, when I found out that's how they did King of All Monsters, I'm like, I'm in. Like, okay, now because this is in a modern day when you want to tell the kind of stories on the scale they're telling, I don't think there's a better way to do it. I don't think that they could go back to the suits and have it really work the same way that it does now, which is both a shame and a blessing because they found a way to keep that spirit alive. There's a
Right.
documentary on all the effects of the Showa era Japanese stuff. It's on YouTube. I can't remember the name of it, and I'll have to put it in the link to the description later. But um, it's really cool. Like I thought I knew a lot, and I did. But then you just see these guys talking, and they're humble and they're smart, and they did some things like, oh, I never would have thought of that, and it all makes sense. And there's a charm to seeing a guy in a big rubber suit crushing these little miniatures. Weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of work over in
Hmm.
like 5 seconds. It's nuts. It's crazy. So I think
Yep.
in today's world where everything's pixels and stuff, it's a thing. Um, I feel like the next step would be motion capture on the scale of actually bringing in miniatures of buildings and things for them to interact with, so that they're not just guys on a mat doing a thing.
Hmm.
I feel like that would be the next step as well. Um,
Yeah.
I have no idea how long Legendary Films plans to do the MonsterVerse. I hope it's a very long timeline because there's money to be made. Um, what would you want to see next? Do you think they should go into like maybe solo films for certain characters, like a Mothra or something, or do we just need to get more monsters in, build it up, and just keep getting bigger and bigger? Like, where in your perfect? If they said, "Here's the money, here's all the staff," what would you do next?
Well, pre-pandemic, before Godzilla versus Kong was delayed a million times,
Right.
what I was hearing and reading was that Godzilla was going to be done with Legendary after this film, which seems to be the case because the next thing they're announcing is Son of Kong without Godzilla. And what they were saying is that Toho was going to take back Godzilla and relaunch basically the Showa era films with a tighter continuity, a la Marvel, because everybody wants to be Marvel these days. So they were going to go back to, having a Godzilla film, a Mothra film, a Rodan film, and then team them up all over again. Basically Showa era, but with a tighter continuity like we saw in the 90s. Because the Showa era, there was a very loose continuity, but, monsters would die in one film, come back in the next with no explanation. So they want to do it a little better this time. And I think that would be interesting if Toho took the rights to everything back and brought back guys we haven't seen in a while, like Anguirus or Baragon or even Varan, who only got really one appearance. I think that would be interesting. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with the effects, because I'm pretty sure Suitmation is over. It ended with Final Wars. So Suitmation is going the way of stop motion, and that's a thing of the past. Everything's going to be digital now. So it'll be interesting to see if they do motion capture at Toho, if they go straight CGI, or whatever the case may be.
Well,
so hopefully it'll be something.
Yeah, and I think looking at Shin Godzilla, there's certainly life to breathe in yet. Because that was mostly CG. There was some miniature stuff, and I believe there was some motion capture on that, if memory serves. But it was a mixture of the different styles. There was no straight up Suitmation, as I recall, but they just took all the stuff and did all the things, and it was such a different take on the whole lore. Like Doug,
yeah,
and I thought it really did a good job of telling the story it needed to tell. So I think that it felt like they were like, all right, we want to give you a Godzilla film, but we want you to do something like, just do something crazy. Do something so Japanese, no one's even going to, like, take notice, right?
Right.
But it felt like they had a story they wanted to tell and got offered the Godzilla thing at the same time, and they just went. And because there is such a Oreo cookie kind of vibe to that film. It's like, oh, that's the best possible way to have updated the character. So I agree that if Toho does retain the rights and just move forward, I wouldn't lose a wink of sleep over it. But I would absolutely love to see them do 2 more films. Do a film that serves to introduce, on some level, some of the remaining bigger monsters in the series, like Anguirus. Maybe brings out a Zilla type creature just to kind of like a wink nod, and a few other monsters just to kind of say what's going on. And at the very end of the film, Godzilla comes out and says, "Shut up!" and then everyone just shuts up, and that's the end of the movie. And then the final film would be like that Final Wars where, like, okay, all hell is broken loose because XYZ. Maybe the villain from King of the Monsters, Last Action Hero guy. His twin brother is like, oh, I vow my revenge. Something cheesy. It has to be cheesy. Or like the mad scientist Mechagodzilla son, like that guy, his son is like, like something like that. Everything's going nuts, and Godzilla has to more or less by himself with a resurrected or son daughter of Madra and Rodan have to then just go nuts, Final War style, and have like gigantic, all at once, not one on one, but one gigantic. You're setting up for 45 minutes, and you have like an hour 10 of just battle in one arena, like you're watching a sporting event. I wish they would do that. And if you think about relative costs, wouldn't be much, because you're setting things up with humans, and you set the film up in such a way that there's no need for humans to be anywhere near this or comment on it, Raymond Burr style, and just really give us, like, to me, the perfect Godzilla film would have no humans in it at all, in terms of character development. You see some reaction shots, some people getting crushed, but everything's told through the story. And I hate to bring this up, but we come back to Godzilla versus Megalon, where there's a lot of visual storytelling, where in that moment, in that context, I can accept that means tail slide kick. Why can't you do something a bit more serious that has a bit more built up around it and really do something cool like that? I don't think Japan's going to ever do something quite like that because they're Japanese. That's not how they think. But in America, you can pull something that crazy off. However, because Legendary Films is such a big thing, and they're not making gigantic gobs of money off of the franchise, I don't think they'd ever get it past marketing. Like, how do we sell this? There's no stars in the movie. I'm like, fuck, there's
Right,
stars.
exactly.
I would love to see that. But again, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm an idealist. It'll never happen. But I wish it would. I really do. So we're right at the 90-minute mark. I figure we'll do a few more comments, see if that propels us forward. Otherwise, we will go with our day. World Bit of Cardboard says, I have loved Godzilla since childhood. I mean, obviously, same. I'd watch local station Godzilla theater every Saturday morning, and then after go stop my brother's Hot Wheel cars with my Shogun Godzilla. There you go. It's awesome.
Yep.
That's the kind of thing we're talking about. Good memories for sure. And they're always talking about different things. Here's an interesting idea. Give us a live action Godzilla versus Evangelion. See what you're going with there. A little crossover there. That's cool. I mean, I've always wanted to see Godzilla versus Robotech. I thought that would be cool. Or like a Godzilla versus Voltron or whatever. I just think it would be fun. Or Godzilla versus the Thundercats would be fun. Just that'd be neat. As a short film, it'd be fun.
Yeah, I think the dream movie for a lot of kaiju fans is Godzilla versus Gamera, if that will ever happen. But I think that would be interesting.
I do feel like that's on the level of like a Freddy versus Jason, but that would have to be done in Japan for it to work out right. It would have to. Spoilers: Godzilla wins in like 10 minutes, but that's a movie like that. He's a fucking turtle. Like, who cares?
He can breathe fire though.
Yeah, but it's weak sauce. It's weak sauce. I'm with you.
Not a turtle fan.
Nah, not really. Now,
what if you were a ninja?
That's entirely different. I'm sure IDW did. I want to say IDW did some crossover because I believe they had Ninja Turtles and Godzilla at the time. And if they didn't do a crossover, they're stupid. I
don't think Godzilla's crossed over with anyone in the comics.
Such a shame.
Toho is very stingy.
They shouldn't be, though. I understand why they are.
Right.
But in a world where, Godzilla Raids Again exists, let's lighten up. Just saying. Dave C., straight from the pit, says, I'm tired of people using the word campy to describe stuff. Have you guys heard this word on YouTube? Kind of disrespects people. Yeah, of course, we've heard the word because it's something. I think at the end of the day, I don't know that there's necessarily a better word to describe certain kinds of things. When we talk about cheesy wasn't really a thing until late 80s, early 90s. So campy, camp, pomp, circumstance, drama, the whole thing. It's kind of like that guy who's doing Shakespeare in the Park by himself, like very over the top, very in your face, not meant to be taken seriously. That's what most people mean when they say camp. The Dita De Laurentiis Flash Gordon is probably the best example of camp you'll ever come across. The 66 Batman being the most notoriously large thing described by that word. I don't have any concern with someone calling the middle Showa era stuff Godzilla campy, because it is. It's really out there. But it's still fun, and it doesn't make it less valid of an entertainment medium. It's just not as serious as something that maybe doesn't have as much pomp to it. I've never felt insulted by that. Is there ever been a point where you were in the camp where it's like, well, no pun intended, that you took offense to that?
No. I mean, I wear my Godzilla fandom on my sleeve, and like I said, we're such a niche fandom. It's like, if you're going to be a Godzilla fan, you're not going to give a damn what anybody else thinks about anything.
It's true. However, I know Dave is a fan of the metal, as am I. I will say this: like Godzilla, I'm pretty chill with. But one thing that I just said this the other day. When people make fun of like death metal vocals and say, "Oh, it sounds like Cookie Monster," I'm like, dude, I've been hearing that for 30, 40 years. Like, it's enough.
Yeah.
Okay, like I get it. Okay, great. All right, let's move on. You know, and certainly there are campy bands out there of that style, and I bring this up to say I have a sense of humor about myself. There's a band called Benediction, one of my favorite bands. There's one particular record. It's called "The Dreams You Dread," and they got a guy, Dave Ingram, to replace another guy, Barney Greenway, who was and is in Napalm Death, but his early vocal stylings have more of a bellow than a growl to them. Well, when they brought on Dave, they're like, well, we don't want to stray too far from that style because it did well for us on that record, so try to emulate that a little bit. He went a little too far. And he went from more of a he went from that to no sound like Fat Albert to it, like he's basically going and it would have been fine. Dreams You Dread, check that out. It's ridiculous, but good. If you can get once you get past the initial Fat Albertdom of that, it's a really great album. I have a sense of humor. I can laugh at my stuff, my fandom. So when someone says campy for like Godzilla or Batman, even some early death metal stuff, like I'm not too bent out of shape out of it by it. But I am 44, and I've grown some thicker skin. You got to learn to laugh at yourself, and I don't find it disrespectful. People have way more direct ways of being disrespectful to you in this day and age, especially on YouTube. So don't worry about it. If they mean it in a dickish way, then they're just dicks, and that's the end of that as far as I'm concerned. And Jesse says, I was late today. There was no shame, just like there's no shame in being late to smashing that like button. Not wrong, sir. Not wrong. Not wrong. It's just one of those things. So I'm going to go through one other thing here. Jesse previously said, my foot tall Godzilla fought military micro machines. It was a perfect match. Never thought about that. I might have to get some vintage military micro machines for my 12-inch Playmates Godzilla. I think that would be fun. That would be fun. Oh, no worries, Dave. My absolute pleasure. So, you made it 90 plus minutes. Was there ever any doubt?
No.
No, I didn't think so. I didn't think so either.
We're good. We're good.
If anything, we could have done a show about each era, a Showa of each era. We would have been fine. But I wanted to give this overview because I feel like when someone likes Godzilla as much as you and I do, it's a neat way to get a window into their soul a little bit without having to ask like deeply personal questions and shit like that. So we're gonna have to bring you back to ask those deeply personal questions and make your face turn red a little bit at some point. But in all seriousness, was an absolute treat and a pleasure to have you here. I don't
Same
get
here.
to talk with many folks, and so for no other reason than I get to have that conversation with you again. You've been nothing but a tremendous friend and ally, and I know you don't make a lot of content, but for those that do want to see what Carl does, you're over on Instagram at Gojitron, correct?
Right.
Do you have any designs on making content of your own in the future? Aside from
on
that?
YouTube? Hell no.
Oh.
I'm in enough Patreons to know that how much work it is to make videos, and I just don't have that time.
Don't listen to Michael and Tony and me bitch about all this stuff. We're lying to you. We're just trying to keep this corner of the market for ourselves. It's all manufactured. It's easy to make content. Super easy. Doesn't take up any time. Doesn't take up any space. Costs you nothing. Calling it but I'm grateful that despite that lack of desire to make stuff, that you will participate in things like this, and I hope that we'll hear from you not just here but in other places in the future. You're an amazing person, a great resource, and a hell of a cool collector.
I appreciate it, Jim. Thanks for having me on.
We appreciate you. We'll see you soon, man. And folks in the chat, thank you for being here. You guys were amazing. Really showed up and asked some great questions. That's what we always hope for. So look for a feature video tomorrow on the channel, and you can catch up with Carl at Gojitron on Instagram. Check out his stuff and like every single picture. That's your homework. I love you. We're out of here. Cheers.